In this video, I'm gonna show you how I created this animated 3D scene without any 3D experience. I was able to create what you just saw relatively easy thanks to an app called Spline, which makes 3D design super easy for anyone. Hey, what's up? My name is Adi, and in this introductory course, I'll show you how to get started with Spline, give you a tour of the interface, show you how to move around in the 3D space, and also show you step by step how to build an animated scene just like this one. Oh, and how to load that in Webflow so you can show it on your website. This video is brought to you by Envato, unlimited creative assets all in one place. Follow the link in the description to find out more. So let's start with the basics, and in case you're wondering, Spline is totally free. It works on both Mac and Windows, and the best part is it works directly in your browser. So to get started, you would go to spline.design and you would need to create an account. It's free, so anyone can do it. You can also use your Google account, and once you're logged in, you can work directly in your browser. However, for this course, I'm going to be using the standalone Windows application. There is no difference between the browser app and the Windows or Mac app. It all works exactly the same way. Now, once you get into the app, you'll be presented with a list of your files up here, and also a bunch of tutorials and examples from the Spline library. These are objects created by the Spline team, which are available for you to use in your own projects. You can also see some really cool creations from the community. And to create a new file, you can click right here or right here. And you can also import other 3D files into Spline, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and create a new file. And Spline just gives you some suggestions here for objects that you might want to use in your design. It's not mandatory, obviously, so you can just click outside and hide that panel. Now, quick tour of the UI. On this top toolbar, you'll find a list of your opened files. On the left sidebar, you have a list of your scenes and all the layers in that scene. In the middle, of course, you have, let's call it the canvas. This is where you'll do all of your designing. On this secondary toolbar, you have access to a lot of tools. You can create rectangles, ellipses. There's some AI generation features that you get when you get the super package, which is like a, well, supercharged version of Spline. It's a paid edition, and you basically get access to some new features. And if you click the plus sign here, you can also scroll down and find a list of objects that you can just click or select, and then on your canvas, click and drag. You can hold down Shift to keep the same proportions, and you can place that object on your canvas. And on the right side, you have, let's call it an inspector. This is a properties panel, basically, where if you select an object, you'll find the different properties for that object. Now, you can select an object on your canvas, like, for example, this default rectangle, and you can press the backspace or delete key to get rid of that. Now, if you're used to working in something like Figma or Sketch or one of the Adobe products, which are basically 2D tools, so you're working in 2 dimensions, and you're working in Spline for the first time, which is a 3D environment, it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. So the very first thing you would want to do is learn how to move around in 3D space. And the first thing you can do is use this gizmo right here at the bottom. And you'll see that by clicking any of these points, your camera will basically rotate. The way you see things will basically change, right? So for example, this is like a top-down view. If I click this right side, it's going to be a lateral view. I can click this one, the blue, and it's going to be a front view. But also, if you hold down Alt or Option and left click with your mouse, you can orbit. And this is where things start to get interesting, right? You can now see stuff in 3D. And this is the cube that we created earlier. So you can use the gizmos, of course, and you can see that they kind of rotate, or they kind of match the rotation of your view here. But you can always use them to, see the top maybe, or the front or the side of your scene. I can always click reset, and that's gonna basically reset the camera view to a front view. And again, hold down Option or Alt and left click with your mouse to orbit around. You can also pan by using space and drag. So press the space bar and then click with your mouse and kind of pan around your 3D scene. You can also zoom in or out with your mouse wheel, like so, or you can use Command on a Mac or Control on Windows, plus or minus, to zoom in and out. You can also reset the camera by going right click and choosing Reset Camera, and that's going to bring it to that front view. It's the same as clicking here, or you can press Alt-R on Windows. It's probably Option-R on a Mac. There's also a handy keyboard shortcut. So let me pan around here. If I select this object and I press S, that's going to center the camera on this object. Now, right here at the bottom, you have a toggle between orthographic and perspective view. Now, orthographic means that the objects will stay the same size regardless of the distance. And it's better used for stuff like technical drawings because you have no depth distortion. While perspective view looks a little bit different, right? Because the depth and size will change with the distance. Objects will look more realistic, right? This looks more like a cube than it did here, right? And this is great if you want, to immerse yourself in the 3D environment and have more natural looking scenes. There is also an isometric view you can activate by clicking here, like so. Now you'll notice that when we select an object, we have these controls for interacting with it in 3D space. And 3D space basically means the y-axis, which controls the position of the element in an up and down direction. We have the x-axis, which controls it left to right, and we have the z-axis, which controls it like this, so more towards you or further away from you. It really depends how you look at it. So you can use these three to move an object around. You can use the little circle right here to make an object bigger in that direction, right? So if I want to make this bigger on the z-axis, I will click this. And it's going to make it bigger like so. Or if I want to make it bigger on the y-axis, I would do this. I can also click on any of these three circles to kind of move the object like so. And I can use these arcs to rotate an object. And you can hold down Shift while you do this to rotate it in increments of 5 degrees. Pretty cool. Command or Control Z to undo. And of course, you can use this to rotate like so, or this. It really depends on what axis you want to rotate it on. And if you want to make an object bigger or smaller, you can also use the corners right here to drag it and size it in any way you want. Alternatively, of course, you can also use the properties here on the right side to affect the scale, the position, the rotation, and so on. All right, so now that you're more familiar with Spline and the 3D environment, let's design something, shall we? Recently, I needed an eye-catching intro for one of my videos, but video editing is not my strong suit. So I turned to Envato Elements for a creative boost. For the first 10 seconds of this project, I used these two video titles, along with these two geometric backgrounds. I imported everything in DaVinci Resolve, made a few adjustments to the text, and done. The result? A vibrant, eye-catching intro that sets the tone for the rest of the video. Now, I'm no Spielberg, but I love the end result, so I would highly recommend Envato Elements. Huge library of assets, one subscription, and unlimited downloads. For more info, check out the links in the video description. And before we get started, please remember that I am a beginner when it comes to all of this, so is what I'm about to show you the best way of doing things? I don't know. Time will tell. I will probably make mistakes, which is fine because, as I was saying, it's a learning experience. With that in mind, let's get started. Now, this is what I'll show you how to create today. And it's a pretty simple 3D scene. It has this morphing sphere, and then these three objects, which are actually using a glass material on the larger side, right? So you'll see that as I'm rotating, that material will kind of diffuse whatever is behind the 3D object. You can see it like here, for example, right? So it's a very acrylic looking like glass material. And on top of that, we have sort of a solid material, and then some icons on top of it, which are, again, extruded. They're a little bit beveled. And I'll show you how to do all that. And also, I'll show you how to animate this scene. So it looks like this. The sphere is actually morphing into different shapes. And these other three objects are kind of changing their rotation, changing their position. And this is, super, super easy to do in Spline. So let's get started. And we'll create a new file here. Yeah, we'll start by deleting that rectangle. So the only thing that's left for us in this composition, in this scene, is our directional light. And that's going to illuminate our scene nicely, as you'll see in just a little bit. So let's start by creating that middle ball, basically that morphing sphere. So we'll go up here to plus, and we'll scroll down, and we'll select sphere. Then click and hold down Shift to create a sphere. So let's press S to center our view, and let's right-click and reset position. That's going to put it right in the middle of my document, like so. Now you can see that this directional light casts lights and shadows, right? So if I toggle it off from the layers panel, you can see what effect that has. Pretty cool. And of course, you can select this light and move it wherever you want to get the lighting effect that you want. Pretty nice. Now, let's select our sphere. And the way objects and surfaces are constructed within Spline is by using materials. So if you look in the inspector here, in the properties panel, we have some lighting. We have a lighting material, which, if I toggle off, it looks like this. And we have a color material. And the color, I can click in here and I can change this to whatever color I want. And I can also change the intensity here. So if I just want 50% of that, I can have 50%. But what I'm going to add here, and let's look at the original example, it has sort of a liquidish, kind of almost metallic look. So to achieve that, we're going to use something called a matte cap. So we're going to replace the color with a material called matte cap. And there are a few you can choose from here. These are basically images, and Spline will basically map these images on the surface of your object. So If I select this red one, it looks like this. If I select this or this, now you can see that the the way the surface looks, the material looks is different. For our example, we're going to choose this one. And you can upload your own matcap images, but we're not going to go into that right now. So this is kind of the effect that we have so far. We have like a glossy surface. We get some nice color to it. So we're starting to get there. Also, to create that kind of morphing effect, we're going to add a new material from here, which is called displace. So click this, select displace, and there are a bunch of types here. Honestly, I don't know what these are doing. They have, slightly different effects to them. I'm going to go with just this one, simplex, and you can, play around with the scale here, and you can play around with the movement, and you can also, choose just how strong the effect is. I'm going to go with something like this. Maybe let's scale it down a little bit. Maybe like so. Maybe the movement a little bit smaller. I'm not going to create an exact replica of the stuff that you see here, but we're going to try to mimic its appearance as best we can. All right, so that's our morphing ball, and we'll get to animating a little bit later. For now, we just want to create all of the elements. So the next stuff we can create are these 3 icons here that have like this glass base to them. So let's create that base first. So let's go in here. We're going to press R, that's for the rectangle tool. And we're going to draw a rectangle. Hold down Shift to make it a perfect rectangle. And let's switch this to perspective so we can see things a little bit better. Now, with the rectangle selected, I can go in my properties and I can extrude it like so, essentially turning it from 2D to 3D. And let's go with, I don't know, 60. I'm also going to bevel the sides. So let me zoom in a little bit closer so you can see exactly what that's doing. And beveling will basically add a bit of roundness to all the edges. And I'm not going to go crazy here, just maybe 4 should do the trick nicely. And you can also round off the corner edges. So maybe something like this. So we have our base. Now let's add a glass material. So I'm going to go in here, and instead of color, I'm going to choose glass. And you can click on this to change its properties. So for example, if we were to look at the scene from a different angle, like so, so if we're looking at the sphere through the glass, we can change out how much it blurs the background. We can change the thickness, the refraction, a bunch of properties here that you can just, play around with and find the effect that looks the best to you. In my case, I think this looks just fine. So let's keep that. So that's our first glass box. Now let's add a top element to it, and then the icon, right? And the top element, as we can see here in this recreation, is also rounded. It's a little bit smaller than the glass surface. It's also beveled. You can see it has nice rounded corners. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to press the rectangle key again, and then just click and drag a rectangle that's almost the size of my glass box. And here in the inspector, you can actually turn on snapping either for the grid or for the object, which means if I start moving this, it's going to snap to, either the edges or the center of nearby objects. In my case, I just use that to center this perfectly. So now if we press on the green and we get a top view, this is what it looks like from the top. And we can go in here, smooth out the corners, maybe something like this. And I can select the object below and maybe make the corners even rounder, whatever looks good to me. So let's go just a little bit more here. So that looks pretty good. Now let's orbit again and let's extrude this to make it a little bit taller. Something like 8 here would do the trick nicely. Let's also bevel. I think around 2 is just fine. Now let's bring in some icons. And here we have 3 icons. We have a kind of a play icon, we have a cursor, and we have this refresh. And I have those as SVG files, so they're vectors, and they look like this. So now we need to import them in our project. So coming back here, we're going to click this icon, and we're going to say open/import or Control-O on Windows. From here, select vector or SVG, and I'm going to select my first SVG icon. Spline automatically places that in the middle, but I can bring it over like so. We need to do a bit of rotation to it because currently it's being displayed like this. So we need to rotate it to match the plane that I'm working on. Okay, so select this and I'm going to rotate it like this while holding down Shift until we get to 90 degrees. Now, let's just use the gizmos to bring it over. And because I have snapping set to object here, I can use the up and down, and it's going to tell me exactly when it lands on the surface below it. Let's click this to scale the object on all 4 sides, and let's do 1.4 scale. And then we'll use this again to center it, basically. And let me just switch to the top view here. So that now that's perfectly centered. And we can actually make it a little bit bigger. Let's click this again and scale it to 1.6, like so. And then just use these handles to center it. Great. Now let's go ahead and select the shape right here and let's extrude it. And we're going to use something like maybe 4. That looks pretty good. 1 for bevel, just to round off those corners a little bit. Let's also turn on lighting so that its surfaces are illuminated, basically, and it casts shadows. And let's change the color to, I believe we were using some kind of blue there. And if you feel like the shape is a little bit rough, you can actually select it, and you can increase the subdivisions. That's going to make it a little bit smoother. Okay, so now let's select the object below, and we can actually rename these in the layer panel. Let's call this icon support. Let's call this glass support. Yeah, and then we have our morphing sphere and so on. You can even group elements. So I can select the icon and the icon support, Command or Control G, and that's going to create a group. So now when I click this, I can move it or do anything with it as a group. And now that I look at it, I think, this icon could be a little bit bigger. So let's select it and let's scale it to 2.4. Yeah, that's a little bit better. So now we need to realign it with the object below. And you can also do that by selecting these 2 objects and going here and say align to X. I want to align this to the center and also align the Z-axis to the center, because the Y-axis basically moves it up and down. Great. And this is a group. By the way, all imports come with this group, and you can actually ungroup the selection. You can select that, delete, and you're just left with the shape. So that's no problem. let's actually reduce the extrusion there to about 3. So that's much better. Now let's select the icon support. And I'm also going to change the color here. And you can use a color picker. And let's make that a little bit less pronounced. Something like this. Okay, so now I can select all of it. Command G or Control G to create a group. Let's call this play icon. So now with the icon selected, I can rotate it like this. Let's actually make the sphere a lot bigger. And let's right click and reset the sphere position so it's right in the middle of my composition. And that's our first icon. Now I can take this, I can move it up, down, forward, backward, left, right. Pretty cool. Now, the process of creating the other 2 icons is very similar. So let's speed it up. So now we have the 3 icons. Now let's kind of position them in front of the sphere. So maybe one should be like this and maybe a little bit further down. This one, let's move it like so. And this one, let's move it like so. Okay, let's see this in 3D. Oops. Okay, that's a little bit better. Let's move this kind of like that and maybe a little bit down just to make sure nothing touches here, like so. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. All right, now what I can do is just, kind of rotate these a little bit on different axes, like so. Maybe this one, rotate it this way, and maybe this way, and maybe this way. And this one, let's rotate it like so. And maybe that way. So that is our initial scene. And if we click this play button or shift space, we can see the final scene without any kind of UI elements. And we can, click and drag to orbit around the scene. We can also use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. But let's add some animation to this. And we'll start with the morphing sphere. And the way animation works in Spline is you create various states of an object and then you transition between them at its simplest level, right? So in the properties panel, if we click on states, we have a base state. That's the default. And then a state that we now just created. And we can change the properties for this state. So for example, I can make the displace a lot bigger. I can work with, the scale here, the movement. I can change even the type here. So this is the initial state. This is my second state. And we can double click and rename like second state. I can even change its size or its position. And the way you animate this is you, of course, select the element, you go to events, and when the whole thing starts, you do a transition. And you transition between the current and the second state. And that looks something like this. So that just plays once. But you can change these properties here. You can loop it infinitely, for instance. And you can do a ping pong, which means back and forth. And you can change, of course, the duration of the animation. Let's say 5 seconds. You can change the easing. You can do no easing. You can do a little bit of acceleration. You can do spring, which will basically have an overshoot effect, which looks like this. Not particularly helpful for this animation. So we'll just keep it to ease in and out. Now let's change this to something really long, like 20 seconds, which looks something like this. Okay, now what about these? How do we animate these? Well, exactly the same way. We create various states and we just transition between them. So let's click create a new state here. And for this new state, so with it selected, we can, affect the rotation. Maybe it's like this. And maybe it's a little bit further down. So then you go to events, and on start, you create a transition between the current and the other state. How long? It really depends on what you want. You can set the looping to infinite. And now that looks something like this. And again, you can do that the whole cycle, the ping pong. So it goes back and forth. Maybe the animation here is a little bit too long. So let's change that to 3 seconds. And let's change the easing to spring, which looks like this. For now, let's keep it at ease in and out. And we'll do the same for these. Create a new state, do the necessary rotation, scaling, positioning, and then transition. 3 seconds, ease in and out, infinite, ping pong. So now I have 2 icons that are moving in 3D space. And I can do the same for the third one. Create a new state, make my changes, and then animate it. Do I want this to start later? I can add a delay, let's say 1 second. Let's do a 2-second delay on this one, or a 3-second delay. So now it looks like this. And you can play around with this as much as you want and tweak the different properties, but essentially it's that simple. Now, let's say you want to bring this and display it on your own website. There are a number of ways you can do that. I'm quickly going to show you how to load it in Webflow. So you would go to Export and then choose Viewer. And you have a bunch of different options here. You can go to Play Settings and you can choose whether or not to display the background color. In my case, I want to hide it. Whether or not to display a page scroll, I don't want that. I want it to be like a standalone animation. If you want to display a cursor, I'll leave that on. I don't want to allow the user to orbit, pan, zoom, or set an orbit. And I'm going to uncheck these as well. And we're just going to select high as the glass precision here because we want the best quality. And then we'll just update the viewer. And we're going to go right here to the overview and copy this link. So then back in Webflow, I have like a simple demo page. And I want to add that animation right here between the header and my hero area. So I can go to the add panel and select spline scene. Click that and let's drag it right over here under frame 7, like so. So then we're going to click the cog icon, paste in the URL we just created, and I'm going to set some properties to this, like 100% width and height. Let's set it to like 640 pixels. So now if I preview my Webflow page, it loads that spline animation directly in my page. And if I wanted to, be bigger, I can go back to Spline and I can actually zoom in here a little bit. If I want for it to start at kind of a different angle, I can change my camera position here. and then I can update the viewer. So now back in Webflow, if we're gonna reload the spline scene, it shows me that updated viewer position. And that's gonna be reflected in the final page as well. And because I disabled the orbit, the pan, and the zoom controls, I can, click inside the scene and it's not gonna do anything. It's gonna be played out from the single angle. I cannot do anything to it in Webflow. But if I had those turned on, then I can basically orbit around my scene directly in my page here, which is fantastic. And if I want to make this bigger, of course, I can, increase its height, let's say 1080. That's going to be now displayed bigger. All right, folks, and that's about it for this introductory course to Spline. I really like the software. I enjoy working with it, even though the transition from 2D to 3D was rocky at times. It takes a little bit of getting used to, moving around in the 3D space. But once I got past that, it's a real pleasure to work with. And it's something that I'll definitely practice a lot more moving forward. With that said, don't forget to check out the Envato Tuts Plus YouTube channel for more content like this, but also to learn about web design, web development, and a whole lot more. It's all free, so make sure to subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. I'm Adi, thank you for watching, and until next time,